So here it is, the long-awaited tutorial that I'm sure you guys are super pumped about. So we have talked about two-point perspective, learned different vocabulary in regards to it, and then we even practice two-point perspective by doing a simple cube exercise. So this tutorial here will walk you through the process of creating this two-point perspective city using just a handful of materials. I'm going to walk you through the first 3 buildings and then just add in a couple. Some of your requirements for this project, one of the biggest ones, it says that there has to be at least 6 extra buildings. So technically in class we would have done these first 3 together. So if you follow this handout, you would get 4 extra buildings right off the bat, then you'd only be responsible for 2 more. Now this handout is here to guide you through this process and give you some examples of measurements. So if you want to follow this to a T, that's fine. That's why I created this for you. But if you want to create your own measurements, you can do that as well. Don't feel like you're stuck to just these, couple of measurements. But I will help you out with getting your city started. So whenever we begin, we always start by creating our horizon line. Now this paper is 9 inches tall by 12 inches long, so that'll be nice and easy to create perfect measurements for. So if you start your ruler at the top, measure down 4.5 inches, and what I do is create a little horizontal dash that looks something like that. And then I'm going to move over to the right and do the same exact thing. Measure down 4.5 inches, create a dash. If we just do one dot, it could be very easy. Like even though you measured down, you did a great job measuring, you could line up your ruler and it could still be that, and it would still be a straight line, but it's not going to be a perfectly horizontal line. So that's why I always create 2 dashes. That's just to kind of keep yourself in track. So I'm going to go ahead and measure that right across. Now that's going to be our horizon line, and this is where all of our buildings are going to stem from. The next most important step is creating your vanishing points. Your vanishing points are going to be on the extreme left and the extreme right. And I know I've talked about it in class, but I would keep these just as little polka dots if you can. X's or arrows, extra lines like that can become very confusing, especially when you start drawing all these orthogonal lines for everything. So the best way to do it is just to keep it simple for yourself. The next thing we're going to do is create a vertical line in the center of our page, which will essentially break our paper into quadrants. So since this is 12 inches long, I'm going to measure 6 inches and scoot down and measure that again. And then line up those dots to create our vertical line. So now we have something that looks very similar to this. Now this horizon line is where we're going to start branching our buildings from. And then we're also going to create a little sidewalk down here, and I'll teach you guys how to do details as well. So if you have your handout, which I have extras in class if you guys need any, once you have this handout, just to kind of explain this, so these measurements here along the sides, these are how wide the sides of the buildings are going to be. The measurements at the top and bottom are how tall your buildings are going to be. So I'll walk you through the first 3, and I think it'll make a little bit more sense from there. So this center building, we're going to start in the middle and branch off from the sides. So up at the top right here, it says 2 inches tall, and then 1 inch below. So from this center point here, the very middle vertical, we're going to line our ruler up with this center vertical line. We're going to, and I'm putting the 2 inch mark right on the dot. What we're going to do is measure up 2 inches, measure down 1 inch. So again, here I'm measuring up 2 inches, and I'm just darkening that vertical line. again, this is Bristol. It dents very easily. So yes, go through and darken the line, but don't feel like you have to like really like push down on this pencil at all. It's just there so then that way you know exactly where to create your orthogonal lines from. So push down just enough to darken it, but not enough to dent your paper at all. So you could kind of tell here, this line is a little bit darker than the rest of the lines. That's good because we want to know where our edge of our building is going to be. So now that we've created, again, measured up the 2 inches, down the 1 inch, and we created our vertical, you're going to take the top point and the bottom point, bring it back to your vanishing point. So I'm going to use my ruler, and just like in class, it's going to create that kind of long diamond shape. So bringing the bottom back, bringing the top back. Okay, so you should have something like this. Now on our worksheet, it says 3/4 of an inch to the right and 1 inch to the left. So those are your measurements for closing off of the shape. So I'm going to measure to the right first, 3/4 of an inch. Now to create these side measurements, you're always going to start at this center vertical line. The reason why we have the center vertical line is so then that way when we measure out those 2 dots to create our vertical line, this is going to be a nice place to stem from. Then that way when we measure from it, we can get perfectly straight vertical lines as opposed to measuring out once and kind of guessing and getting slightly tilted vertical lines. So this is just here to help you out. So I'm going to line up my ruler, measure out 3/4 of an inch, scoot down, do that again. And then I'm going to close off that shape by lining this up and creating a vertical line. This vertical line doesn't have to go the whole way up and down. Since it's closing off your shape, you could keep it within the space that the orthogonal line creates. The left measurement is going to be 1 inch. So I'm going to line up the 1 inch mark with my center vertical, create a dot, scoot it down, and just repeat that process again. So we just went and created that first building that's in the center. What I'm going to do now is erase the top orthogonal lines, keep the bottom. This is going to be the start of our sidewalk, so you're going to need to keep that there. So I'm going to take a big eraser, erase this off. And this is the reason why I always say draw light until you get it right, especially with perspective. We're going to be erasing a lot, so you want to make sure that you're keeping your lines nice and light. I do have extra Bristol if you mess up and you want to restart, but as long as you're keeping your pencil lines light, you should be fine. Okay, I'm going to keep my horizon line just so I know where that's at, and eventually I will erase it, but I want to draw out all of my buildings first. So now what we're going to do, this middle measurement, I don't know if you can see it, let me zoom in here. This middle measurement here is how far we're going to measure from that center vertical line, so then that way we can create our next vertical line. Now the bottom doesn't have a measurement. The reason why is because we're going to line up the bottom of the of this vertical. It's just going to touch the bottom orthogonal that we kept because that's going to be our sidewalk, but we will measure up 2 1/4 inches to create the top or the height of the building. So let's create our vertical first, and then we'll create the measurements up. So again, it's 1 1/2 inches away from this vertical line. So I'm lining up my ruler to the center vertical, measuring over 1 1/2 inches. scooting up, doing that again. 1.5 inches. And then I'm going to line these up and start my vertical. But it needs to be 2.25 inches above this this horizon line that we've created. So I'm going to line up 2.25 inches on my horizon line, still lined up with where my vertical is, and I'm just going to line that up, bring it down. So that creates our next vertical line, which again will be this building here. So the measurement over is your 1.5 inches, and then your measurement up is 2.25 inches. Again, there's no measuring down because it has to line up with that bottom orthogonal line to create your sidewalk. So now that we've done that, repeating the process, taking this top point, bringing it back to the vanishing points. You also have to remember to bring the bottom points back to the vanishing points, but I'll teach you a little trick there. So quickly, I'm just going to line up these dots, bring them down. Now this top of this building is going to get cut off. This building's overlapping this one, so I'm going to stop my line there. If you want to bring it the whole way down, you can. I'm just saving myself some erasing for later. Now, we took the top back to the vanishing points. This right side bottom is coming back to the vanishing point because this building is lining up with our sidewalk line. But you still have to remember to bring this left side back to the vanishing point. And people get confused with that a lot, or they'll forget that. And it's just what I call a sneaky sidewalk. So even though this is coming all the way back to the vanishing point, it is easy to forget since the other side we don't have to bring back to the vanishing point because it's already done for us. Make sure you remember to bring the left side over to the vanishing point to create your sneaky sidewalk. That also gives the illusion that you could like walk in between these two buildings. So just remember that. Now I'm going to create a tiny little vertical line here to close off that building. I don't want it to awkwardly cut off there, so I'm just going to take a tinier eraser, clean that up a little bit. And you can see that in our worksheet too, that we kind of close it off before there. Now we have to create the final vertical line to close off the shape. So this next measurement here, 2.25 inches, we're going to measure away 2.25 inches from the center to close off that shape. And then creating our vertical. And keep that vertical in between the top orthogonal line and the bottom. And that will create your closed off wall. So you could get rid of that line. The last building that we're going to do together is going to be on the opposite side. Feel free to do these ones. I just wanted to go through the first three. Normally people, once they get the idea of the process and understand how to follow along with the measurements, they fly with it. So if you have any issues or need something explained, please feel free to come and talk to me in class or send me an email. But I'll go over this one, show you how to do the sidewalk, and then I'll let you go on your own. So we're going to look over at our next vertical line. So it's going to be 1 3/4 inch to the left. So 1, 2, 3, right here, line it up. Again, do your 2 dots. Create your vertical. Now this vertical comes up 2.5 inches from your horizon line, so keep that in mind. So I'm going to line up the 2.5 inch line on my horizon line so I know that it needs to end all the way up here. I created my vertical. Next step, bring the tops and the bottoms of the vertical back to your vanishing point. Don't forget the sneaky sidewalk because you're going to have one in here too. It's just going to be on the opposite side. So I'm bringing this side down. The bottom left side is already brought back because we kept that orthogonal line. the top vanishing point goes back to this. I'm going to stop it there because I don't want to draw this the whole way since this is going to overlap it anyway. And then don't forget the sneaky sidewalk. This little dot here needs to come back to the opposite vanishing point, just like this building did there too. So for this, you could just create a tiny little vertical line, close off this side since it's going to be hidden anyway. The left side of this, you're going to measure out 2.5 inches, and then we're going to close off that shape. So I'm lining up my 2.5 inch mark on my ruler with my center vertical, doing my 2 dots, and then closing off that shape. Okay, now that that's done, erase the orthogonal lines. We use a tiny eraser to get rid of this part. And then you have your first 3 buildings. So in addition to these 3 buildings, you need 6 extra buildings. There's also other details that you're going to need to add. Please check your checklist to make sure you have all of these items. Also, make sure you have all the extra decorations as well, and that those details are following 2-point perspective. So quickly, I'm just going to show you how to create a door using 2-point perspective. The video that we watched in class that went over drawing details in windows with 2-point perspective, that's also on our Google Classroom, so feel free to use that as a resource as well. I'm going to draw a little door on this building. I'm going to measure over from this vertical. I'll do 1/4 inch. And I'll do another 1/4 inch. Now, whenever you're doing details, you can measure from this, the vertical you created for your building if you want. If you want to be safe, go ahead and feel free to measure from the center vertical line too, just as long as you're measuring twice to get the proper measurement. I'm going to just make it about that tall. And then I'm going to take this, the top point, bring it back to the vanishing point. Now, since this door resides on this plane, you only have to worry about this vanishing point. You don't have to worry about bringing it back to this one, and that's because your details are going to follow whatever plane they're on. So hopefully that helps to explain that. I'm going to line it up, bring it over, and then create one more vertical line. To close off the shape of my door. So remember that your details are also going to be following the rules of perspective. To create your sidewalk, what I do is I measure down about from our center point about 2.5 inches. Once you have that point right here, you're going to bring that back to your vanishing points. This is going to create kind of the edge of your sidewalk. Now that we have that, there's also an edge to that. So rather than it looking flat, I want to make sure that this has a little bit of space to it. So from there, I'm just going to make sure that I measure down, let's say 1/4 inch for that part. And then same thing, bring that back to your vanishing point. And the farther it goes back, it just kind of looks like it disappears. So that's good. That's just following perspective there. Oops. And line that back up. Redo. Okay. Let me erase my mistake. Okay. So now that we have top of the sidewalk, the edges, to create the lines that are going back into space, you actually have to connect them to the opposite vanishing point. So let me just explain that quickly first. So to start off my sidewalk, I line it up with this bottom point where we created our first building, and I just connect that bottom point back to my left vanishing point. So it creates a line like that. Now, all you have to do is just rock the ruler side to side, and the farther up it goes, the closer those lines are going to be together. Just make sure that you're still connected to that vanishing point as well. So you have something that looks like that. Those are all the lines on your sidewalk. If you want, just create a couple vertical lines that are going up on the edge, so then that way it looks like it's kind of following that perspective or going up, giving it a little more dimension. Then you're just going to repeat that on the opposite side. So I'm connecting it to this vanishing point now. I'm going to start with where this sidewalk ends. Great Shel Silverstein book, by the way. We're going to connect this over, draw your lines. Do you see how it's becoming kind of more realistic a little bit? So now I lined it up. I'm going to scoot it up a little bit, draw a line, scoot it up, which I'm going to move this over a little, scoot it up a little bit, draw a line, now that I'm getting closer back, I'm going to make those lines a little bit closer, because if you think of these lines going back into space, the farther back they go, the closer they appear together. Should have something like that. And again, I'm just going to go through, create little baby verticals. You could probably freehand this. I don't think you need to use a ruler for that. Okay. So this is as far as we're going to go together. Make sure you have your first 3 buildings that we create together, your sidewalk with our details on it. You'll be responsible for the other items on the checklist, so 6 extra buildings on top of these. Again, you have 4 here. If you want to use those measurements, feel free. You'll still have to create another 2 on top of that, but it's going to get a little crowded, so you'll have them kind of little pieces of them in the back. If you need to use Pinterest or Google it all to look up details or pick a theme for your city, it's not required, but if you want to like have some fun with this, feel free to do that. If you have trouble creating something using perspective, please feel free to bring this into class and talk to me about it, so then that way I could help you through that process. Remember to ink your lines once you're totally completely done. I would not recommend doing that until you are done, because if you add on details to this, you can't erase a Sharpie once it's down. So draw everything out first, then go through it with Sharpie. Remember your due dates for this project. It's written on our Google Classroom, and have fun with this, okay? So I think even though it creates a blank canvas, it kind of opens itself up to whatever your creative little mind will create. So good luck. If you need me, I'm here for you, okay? Have a good day.